Good morning, everybody. Good morning. And really, thank you for joining us. Today you'll be hearing from Executive Vice President and Provost Jeff Hecker and Interim Vice President for Administration and Finance Ryan Lowe and myself. And since the three of us will be taking turns as we move through the slides, I'd like to ask that we go through the entire presentation. Then we will absolutely have a Q&A at the end, and we will happily go back and reproject any slides that somebody might want to focus on. The point of today is that we are laying out a process and a timeline, and we are not announcing any decisions. We will be making presentations and having informational sessions during the coming months, and our goal is for everyone to understand what we're doing and why, and have the opportunity to provide feedback. And we'll make this point several times today. We also will talk about how to submit feedback. The timeline for the budget process is accelerated over previous years, and Ryan will speak more extensively about this, but in a nutshell, it allows us to align better with the legislative budget process, and it also allows time for the Board of Trustees to be more actively engaged in a process that they are ultimately responsible for. Previously, the campus budget proposals were presented to the Board of Trustees in a one-day session with about 20 minutes per campus, and it was usually done in March. And then the trustees literally had about 2 weeks to process this and approve it. And that just is not tenable in our current circumstances. The new process will give board members several months to weigh options, delve into the proposals, and in the long run, this will enhance the transparency of the entire process. The timeline is admittedly aggressive. And while that timeline will present some challenges, it will also allow us to have an opportunity to have a campus dialogue much earlier in the process, like today. This will permit, I think, greater campus understanding of the budget in general and the FY16 budget creation process. And additionally, it will allow greater opportunities for feedback. And I can't stress that last point enough. We really do want feedback. We want thoughtful engagement as we proceed. So let me give a brief overview of the presentation. First, we'll provide some context for the budget. We'll see some of the early returns on the investments we've made in recent budget years. Then there'll be more specifics about the FY16 budget. We'll talk about the cost pressures we're facing, some of the strategic investments we're recommending, and most importantly, the guiding principles and decision criteria that we propose to use. And we'll wrap up with a conversation about what's next, and once again, what are the opportunities and how to get your feedback to us. So the next shot, is a screenshot showing the web page, both the Vice President for Administration and Finance on the right and my web page on the left. And what's circled are the places where if you click, it takes you to a form that you can type in feedback and submit it to us. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thank you very much, and just like to say, just introduce myself for those folks that I haven't had a chance to meet yet. My name is Ryan Lowe. I've been Vice President for Admin and Finance for about 6 weeks now, so still finding my way around the campus. It's the first time I had no idea where this place was, even though I've walked by it a couple of times. But really wanted to thank folks for the welcome for my 6 weeks that I've been here. Just fabulous staff, and really looking forward to my time here. Also, I want to thank Sharon. Want to thank Claire for actually putting this together. To taking just a handful of handwritten notes that we put together and actually turning it into something that made a lot of sense. So, big thank you to both of them. As the President talked about, one of the big changes that we have going into this budget cycle is the timeline. So up at the top, you'll see the system timeline. You'll see how we fit within that system timeline below. As the President said, I think the thing that I like most about this timeline is this piece right here. It's the fact that we're having a conversation in October. We're looking to have additional conversations, both formal in December, in the spring again, but also through surveys, through email, any opportunity. I am connected 24/7, via phone or tablet or watch, you name it, and just really want to emphasize we really want that input throughout the process. The way the timeline is going to work is that we'll be looking to submit a budget to the system by December. We're looking at as an initial submission that we would continue to refine. So if you think of, it's easy for me to think about these things in terms of the legislative process, which is where I spent most of my time. I think about the executive branch budget development. You develop that budget in the fall, you present it to the legislature in January, and then you engage in a back and forth, and ultimately you end up with, what ideally is a better product at the end. And that's what I hope that we'll have here, that we'll spend the next couple of months coming up with a good framework for a budget. We'll continue to have conversations both with the trustees and on this campus, and that we'll end up with a good, solid product in that April-May timeframe. I think, if there's a downside to the schedule, and I don't see it as a big downside, it's that things are still in the process of moving. So, the state appropriation, for instance, benefit rates, things like that will continue to move as we work our way through this process. Hopefully, some of those things will move in our direction and reduce the gap, reduce the need to to cut. But we'll see again as we move through the process. I think it's important to not only talk about how we fit in the University of Maine system budget, but also how we fit in the state budget process. The state appropriation provides this campus with about $80 million. It's about a third of our E&G budget. So obviously a very important piece of the conversation, piece of the puzzle as we move towards finalizing a budget. The piece that I would really want to emphasize is this piece down here. It's the budget hearings and the work session and the advocacy. I've been the government relations director for the last 2 years for the system, spent a lot of time in Augusta talking about the system's budget needs. And generally, that's me. That's me having that conversation with legislators. It's not an army of people. And what I've heard over the last year or so as we've talked about some of the budget challenges across the different campuses is that folks want to participate in that conversation. And at the end of the session last year, when I was in Augusta, we had a bunch of students and faculty who came up from USM, participated in some of the conversations, had some one-on-one conversations. What the hope would be is that we could expand that. I think we all have an interest in what the appropriation is. We all have an interest in coming to Augusta and making sure they understand the value of investments in higher education. I think we could, we'll expect a lot of new faces in Augusta this year, and I think just relying on one person to have those conversations is a mistake, quite frankly. I think the more people we get there, the more people that can talk about, about making appropriate investments in higher education, I think the better success we'll have in the legislature. I like this chart, for a couple of reasons. One, one of the concerns I always have about, these kind of budget presentations and is that we spend a lot of time focused on the 1% of whether it's the gap or these incremental changes, and very little time talking about the base budget, talking about where the vast majority of our resources are spent. What I like about the chart here on the right is, and I've said a lot that I think the budget is really just a reflection of what our priorities are. And I think what this chart shows is that what our priorities are as a campus are in these two areas. 80% of our budget is compensation and benefits, scholarships, and grants. So it's investment in our people, it's investment in the staff, our faculty, and it's investments in our students. And I think that's absolutely appropriate. I think what I see on the left side is an increasing reliance on the E&G side, on the tuition and fees side. There's I've seen the system-wide chart that kind of tracks like this, the amount of our budget that's associated with tuition versus state appropriation. Those have been going in the wrong direction. So again, about a third of our E&G budget is the state appropriation. That's down about 10% since 2008. We know that the state is still facing difficult financial challenges, but again, just like our budget, the state budget is a reflection of their priorities, and I think we'd like to be in there making the argument that the priority should be investments in education.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, I want to talk a little bit about where we're at with enrollment. As you saw on the prior slide, tuition and fees is the biggest chunk of our revenue. So even though the focus of today is on budget, enrollment plays a big part in what the health of our budget. So here's some data to share, some very good news with respect to enrollment and some challenges with respect to enrollment. Last year we brought in the largest class, the class that entered in fall 13, the largest class. We were saying the largest class until Todd corrected me, and it was the largest class in recent history. There was a post-World War II class or two that was a little bit larger. But in recent history, last year was the largest class. I think that the entering first year class was, 2167 or somewhere in that ballpark. This year, we're bringing in a class not quite as large, but also very large, the third largest in the university's history, in the ballpark of 2,100 students. That's very good news. You show there's an increase from that fall 2013 was a 5% increase over the prior year, and this year is about a 2% increase over that. So we're doing well in our. I'm sorry. The second slide is our overall enrollment. So our overall undergraduate enrollment is growing. This area, this area I think is what's really important and really a game changer in the way the University of Maine has been operating. We're being much more successful in bringing out-of-state students here. Right now our overall undergraduate population, 26% are from out-of-state, 17% back in fall 2010, and that was the historical average. I mean, that's where we varied around 15 to 20%. We're pushing that up. This entering class, the first year students for this fall, 37% are from out of state. And that's very good for our bottom line. Graduate enrollment, the picture is a little different. We've had a decline in graduate enrollment. I think there's a variety of factors that have contributed to that. But we have some new initiatives I'll talk about in a minute to address that or to make a change there. We'll put a new focus on marketing of our graduate programs, and a little bit more aggressive in the efforts to recruit in strategic areas in our graduate programs. This is the picture. So enrollment is one thing, head count, right? But as Claire Strickland frequently points out, head count is great. The coin of the realm is credit hours. So we look at where we're at with credit hours. 2009 was our peak, again associated with that growth of enrollment. We declined in student credit hours for 3 years, and of course that hits us in our bottom line. Last year we were able to reverse that trend, and student credit hours up about 4%, and this year they'll be up again another 2%. So that's very good news with respect to our budget. These data, again, I'd like to point out where sort of to understand enrollment and the enrollment challenges that we face. So this is 2000 through 2020 is actual or projected high school graduates in the state of Maine. And you'll see right through the first decade, whatever we call that, the noughts, we had a steady increase in the number of students graduating from high school in the state of Maine. That's the red line, and not surprisingly, and really without having to do anything dramatic, our enrollments steadily grew along with the number of high school graduates. The high school graduate numbers peaked in 2008 and have been dropping off, and are projected to drop off right through 2020, and then they'll stabilize and start to increase. But for the next several years, we're going to see a drop in high school graduates. That presents a very big challenge for us, as we saw from the prior data, that historically, that's the lion's share of our students. Well, starting in 2011, we bent the trend, as they say. We're able to bring and increase our enrollment. This is head count again. Increase our overall enrollment and our credit hour enrollment against those odds. That's not by luck, that's by investments and by being much more strategic and data-driven in the way we go about marketing and the way we go about recruiting students, and we're having success in that. This is another way to look at the data. Over here, the maps show data from fall 2013, because that's the most recent data we have access to. But the blue part of each pie chart is their in-state enrollment, and the black part is their out-of-state enrollment. Last year we were at 22% overall out-of-state enrollment, our ratio. Vermont, I think most of you know, has a very different model. It's a quasi-private model. Most of their students are from out-of-state. But you see how we compare with our land-grant institution peers. University of Maine, again, our view and our plan is that we have opportunities to grow out-of-state enrollment. And these data show how we've been succeeding in that. We've gone from 17% up to 26% out-of-state enrollment. We have plans, and again, I'll talk a little bit about some investments we'll make in a minute, to continue to move in that direction. Turn things back to Ryan.
So again, going back to what we talked about on the pie chart. Again, as a system, we get about 179 million from the state, about 80 million to this campus. You can see that's down about 10% since 2008. A couple things going on there. The biggest piece of that is just the reality that the state appropriation is down 6.2 million from what it was in 2008. Second piece of that is decreases associated with outcomes-based funding and other initiatives along those lines. Talk a little bit later about our state appropriation request coming up, or actually, maybe I'll just cover it right now. On the state appropriation piece, the system currently has a request in for 3.4% increase in FY16, 3.8% request in FY17. There's a request in for 5.3 million in new Maine economic improvement funding. That would bring the level of funding up to about, it would bring it up to $20 million. We also have a request in for $2.5 million in debt service payments. The idea is that if we were able to get the $2.5 million in debt service, we could support a revenue bond to fund about $22 million across the system in infrastructure projects. So, so ideally the state will be stepping up with bond funds. We'll have some university funds. This is another way, the $2.5 million in debt service that we're looking for the state to make an investment back in our facilities. This is a chart that I really love. I think it's easy, if you read a lot of the papers over the last last several months, even the papers, local papers this weekend, you get the impression that we're increasing tuition, 10% year over year over year, and that's just not the reality. If you look at where we are in 2014, 2015 compared to the other New England land grants, you can see lowest in-state tuition and fees by a pretty good margin over the other campuses. And the other piece I like about this, because it's fresh in my mind, is participated in a college affordability commission with Gianna, and spent a lot of time last week getting criticized for fees, getting criticized for how expensive we were compared to other schools. And I think this is a slide I look forward to going back next week and sharing with some of our legislative colleagues. Again, I think what this chart shows is it's not just a one-year initiative, that there's been an effort on the part of this campus to control increases in tuition and fees. You can see that here. 5-year average going back to 2010, 2% increase, average increase in tuition and fees, in tuition. I think the impressive part about this one is what you don't see, and that it's, again, if you go back a couple of charts, during the same time that we were limiting that growth in tuition was the same time that the state commitment to higher education was going in the other direction. So it wasn't as if the state made a reduction and we just followed it up with a significant tuition increase. What we've tried to do is live within the resources that we have. It's one of the points that we've tried to, certainly tried to make on this in these commission discussions is it's not the cost of education that is just escalating, because the pie itself has remained, largely it's remained the same size. What's changed is the percentage that comes from tuition and the percentage that comes from state appropriation.
So I don't know if everybody can see these. There are a number of UMaine system initiatives, and let me just read down. Can you see in the back? Okay, then I won't read them all. Many of you are aware of some or all of these. It is important as a sort of an overarching statement to say that we are working as a campus to be as efficient and cost-effective as we can with tuition and state appropriation. It goes without saying. All of our efforts are being done to increase efficiencies. We're trying to drive to more effective service delivery, and we're trying to capture savings. But we are doing that in the midst of change initiatives occurring throughout the system. Some of them have or will have cause significant change in the way we do business. And I'm not going to talk about all of them, but let me just say a little bit about outcomes-based funding. There is no denying that the outcomes-based funding formula approach does cause the campus portion of our state appropriation to be reduced. The first year that was in effect, it was 5% of the state appropriation was run through this formula. Last year it was 10%, this year it is 15%. And it is planned to escalate up to 30% ultimately. I have been, I would say, a respectful critic, but a critic of this when I was provost, when I was vice chancellor, and now that I'm president. So far to no avail. But Ryan and Jeff and I have talked about this a bit, and I think what we'd like to do is try to find a way to propose some alternative metrics. Not to substitute for all of them, because I know that won't be successful. We cannot go forward and say, treat us differently than all other 6 universities. That will not be a successful strategy. What I would like to propose is that we come up with some alternative metrics that we think better align with the particular mission of this university, which is the land-grant flagship research university of the state. If we design some alternative metrics, it is not automatic that the campus would fare better or immediately fare better, but we think those metrics might be, in a way, a more appropriate challenge to us and would align better with what we should be focusing on. And if we could come up with it, we're going to try. We are starting to think about it and figure out ways that we might provide some alternatives, that we are still held accountable, that we still have to meet metrics, and that we in a sense, have to compete for those dollars. But we think we could do this in a way that reflects the kind of mission that we have. The other initiatives, I know you're all aware of them, and I know that there are problematic areas. We've all had some problematic issues. I think I would ask you to be, A, patient, but B, the other thing I want to call on everybody to do is be professional and respectful and thorough and provide feedback. And if it's done in that context, it has the chance of being successful. What doesn't work is frankly ranting and railing and expecting people to just change what they're doing, because no one likes to be treated that way and it's not likely to be successful. The last item on the list is the academic portfolio review. This is ongoing. Jeff is playing a very central role. He co-chairs the CAO group, so the provosts of all 7 universities meet every month. Jeff co-chairs that group with Ray Rice, who's the provost at UMPI, and he and Ray are actually the CAO, the provost representatives on the process oversight committee that is chaired by President Foster. So when we talk about the FY16 budget, we are definitely entering this period of preparation with some definite positives, but we must continue to make some strategic investments where appropriate. We have to spend our resources wisely, and perhaps, and this may be the most important thing, we have to be thinking ahead. So we're not just planning for this budget, but we're planning for the years to come.
Well, thanks. So, as we start talking about the FY16 budget, we've laid the context for FY15, talked about some of the progress that we're seeing. As we dive into the FY16 budget, I think it's important to look at some of the cost pressures that we face. Some are unknown, some are ones that we know are going to go up. So compensation and benefits, you know, if you recall back to the pie chart, we know that's a significant portion of our budget. It's also an unknown. We don't know where the benefit rates are going to end up. We don't know where compensation and collective bargaining are going to lead us. But we do know that, you know, that will be one area that we'll need to look at closely. Fuel and electricity, you know, look at the facilities guys up in the right-hand corner. You guys do a fabulous, fabulous job. You know, in a number of contracts around energy and natural gas, and just exceptional work. You know, the downside, if there's such a downside as a great contract, it's when the contract comes up, because then there's that unknown. And so, you know, most of our fuel and electricity costs are, you know, as you would expect, are going to come up due at the end of FY15, the beginning of FY16. So a lot of unknowns there. You know, I think the bright side is that, you know, it's October 2014, and you know, we're not sitting back and waiting, talking about different ideas, different strategies that we can address. But again, you know, another unknown. Depreciation. You know, the system has a goal of moving to 100% of funded depreciation by FY16. This campus has made some significant investments in the campus. I think it's been very positive. But to move to 100% funding in FY16 would mean nearly $7 million in new resources. We'll come back and talk about this one in a slide or two, but you know, that's certainly, you know, one area where we're seeing some pressure. The last few I'll go over fairly quickly. Appropriation adjustments, again, as the president was talking about, that's, you know, outcomes-based funding. We still need to see what comes out of the other end of the formula. Charges associated with IT, procurement, those type of things, those will kind of evolve as we work our way through this process. You know, increased demands for financial aid. And then just traditional ongoing growth needs that you would expect in a university of this size. Some new costs, a couple of new cost pressures. The first one, you know, is associated with, you know, a term I haven't used much before, but I was very prevalent in last year's budget discussions, and that was the idea of smoothing. Using reserves strategically to kind of bridge the gap when you face a really difficult budget challenge. You know, ideally you want to line up those revenues and expenditures, but sometimes that's not possible, and so sometimes you make the decision to use reserves strategically to help you kind of bridge that gap. That was a decision that the campus made last year. I think there's nothing wrong with that. I've made those decisions in other budgets that I put together. But again, the reality is that when you push that out, eventually that bill becomes due, and for us, about $3 million of the structural gap is associated with those three smoothing initiatives, if you will. I think the positive is once we get by this hurdle, and I think, you know, what I've consistently heard from you know, from the president, from the provost, is, you know, what we want to do is we want to line up revenues and expenditures. We don't want to rely on one-time resources. We don't want to rely on emergency funds from the system to fund our ongoing needs. To the extent that we use one-time resources, it just means we're back having the same conversation, usually with a little bit bigger number the next year. So if we can appropriately line those two up, you know, we'll be in much better shape. So again, you know, not to give away what the gap number is, but I think you'll find about 40% of it is associated with those items. So once we get over this hurdle, you know, I think we've done a really nice job of lining up expenditures and appropriations. And the next piece, you know, which I think is very important, we saw the benefit of that on the FY15 slides, is continuing to make the strategic investments that we need to continue that growth ramp. And let the provost take it over from there.
So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the investments that we're making. These investments are part of our FY16 plan. First, I'll talk about the investments we're making in the signature and emerging areas, and then a little bit about our increased financial aid. So these are the areas that last year we worked together as a campus community to identify, and again, I think most of you are aware of the process that we went through. Like, we're proud of that. It was inclusive. We heard from a lot of voices, and there were various stages to it. But we've made a public commitment to say these are distinct areas for the University of Maine. These are areas of excellence, and we're making a public commitment to continue to support those areas and to challenge them to move to the next level of excellence, both in our signature areas and in our emerging areas of strength. So part of this, the signature and emerging areas provide a context. They're not the sole factor, obviously, but they are a factor that we're considering as we put together the budget. We've done that already, and then I'm challenging the deans as they look at the budgets within their areas to do the same thing, to think about these factors and how do we continue to support these areas as they build their budget. And what we did this year, which was unusual, is that we went ahead and put new faculty lines into our budget plan that are going to support some of these areas. So we have 7 faculty positions that have been approved, and they're in the process of either searching now or working their paperwork up to be searched, that are going to support many of the areas that we've identified as signature and emerging. That's exciting, I think, for us. It shows we are investing where we said we would. The last year's exercise wasn't simply an exercise, feel-good exercise, but they're actually putting funds into that. Now, we are engaged now in developing plans to identify and procure more resources for these areas. We've challenged the leaders of each of these areas to let us know what is their vision as they move forward, what's the next level of excellence, and what do they need to get there. So in fact, today are due white papers that outline that, give them not much room to work with, 5 pages. Tell us what your area, tell us the next level of excellence, and what do we need to do that. And our plan then is to look at those needs and figure out what are the best resources to meet those needs. And we'll be looking at MEIF, as Ryan has pointed out, where the system is pursuing additional MEIF funds. We'll be looking at private giving. This process is going to inform our strategic thinking in our development operations. We'll be considering these with respect to state bonds, and we'll also be looking at this as we plan our E&G budget. So again, we're thinking strategically. Our budget plan is not all about what we're going to reduce, but it's also about what we're going to do. The other area I wanted to mention is our investment in scholarships and waivers. So you can see, I mean, I'll ask you to focus primarily on the total. In FY11, we were putting $27.5 million into scholarships and waivers. That's up to 44, or will be in FY16 up to $44 million. As I said earlier, we're being aggressive in enrollment management. We're being smarter in the way we go about it, but we are investing funds in doing that, and bringing the best and brightest students to the university and offering them competitive bids. This is New England is a competitive area. University of New Hampshire really ramped up its efforts last year, and they grew their first-year class by 350 students over the prior year. It's a competitive market, and we need to, if we're going to be successful, we need to compete in that market. And one piece of that is investing in scholarships and using those wisely. Even though we're putting more money into scholarships, this is clearly a net gain for the university. There's no question that even though we're put out more money to attract students and to be competitive, in the long run, it's a net tuition gain for the university. I mentioned a few other areas that that are part of our budget plan at this point, are in our thinking. We'd like to grow the size of the graduate student stipends. Last year we weren't able to do that because of the budget situation. At this point in time, that is part of our plan. Once again, you know, the graduate mission, we are the graduate and research university in the state. It's an important part of our mission. And to be competitive in bringing in the best graduate students, we need to offer competitive stipends. A graduate faculty member could jump up and say, well, we're not. And they're right, but we're getting closer, and we're trying to put investments in there. I'm just going to go backwards, I'm sorry. The other areas I can mention, enrollment management investments. I've shown you the data to show that we're succeeding in enrollment management and growing enrollment, but I've also made the point that the field is more competitive. We're doing some new investments this year. We're working with a company that's going to be doing much more aggressive electronic marketing for us. I'll just give you a sense of what that is. Reaching out, we've historically reached out to 60,000 or so potential students. In the last couple of years, we've grown that to about 100,000. This year, we'll be reaching out and making electronic contact with 250,000 potential students for the university. We've got a company that's working with us to do that. We have another contract with a company that's helping us in managing that information. How do you intelligently mine the queries that you get, students who contact us, how do we go about and strategically reach out to them? So we're continuing that kind of aggressive enrollment work takes some investments. And then we have some positions that we had funded on a one-time basis that our budget thinking now is to move those to base funding. One of the areas is to try to support our research effort is in grant consultants. Vice President Kim, working with the University Research Council, the Faculty Senate and other groups, have listened to the faculty, and there's a variety of things that we're hearing in terms of what they need to be more successful in bringing in external funding. One of the #1 priorities was people to work with them to assist them in developing the grants, so we're investing in grant consultants. We also have a director of assessment. I think it's a very important investment for our university. It's part of our initiative to look at and be self-reflective on how well are we doing in helping to make sure that our students are achieving the competencies that they should be achieving. It's also very important for us with respect to as we develop and move toward our next NEASC accreditation. So those are some of the areas that we're investing in and are part of the model that led us to this overall budget picture.
So again, if you think about the progress working our way through these slides, started with FY16, talked about some of the cost pressures that we have, talked about some of the investments that we feel are critical to make. So then we started kind of honing in on some of those assumptions that we had and try to get down to a real number of what a gap would be. The first piece of that was refining the system-wide rates, the parameters. So obviously the system sets a number of the rates around benefits, things like that. And so, typically, in the schedule that we've been in, they tend to be a little more of an estimate in the fall, and then they get clearer as you work your way through the budget process. And that worked fabulous when the schedule had us doing most of these conversations in March. But since we're having those conversations in October, for the better, I think, we needed to push the system on some of those. We needed to understand what the final results. What we did not want to do was go through a process where we showed up and said, the structural gap is $30 million because of a bunch of assumptions that were on the high side. And so everyone go out and put together plans to make these massive reductions. And then, as we get further down the process, the benefit rate becomes clear, or this particular rate becomes clear, and suddenly it drops substantially. So we really tried to push that conversation around rates, parameters, and I think we made some good progress on that. Depreciation, again, as I mentioned before, the 100% depreciation target, I think that, when I look at the investments that the campus has made over the last couple of years, I think all very positive investments in classrooms and campus. I mean, just really, I think they're absolutely the right thing to do. However, moving to 100% would mean putting an additional $7 million into depreciation funding. Felt like that was probably a little aggressive. As we continue to make investments in the campus, as we bring new buildings on, the value of the campus moves up, which means the depreciation target moves up. So, where we are as of today, last year as a campus, or in this fiscal year, we're at 65% funding. What we're thinking now is 60% funding. So in some ways it feels like we're going backwards, but because the value is increased, actually moving down 5% means our allocation moves up by a little less than $2 million, I think. So continuing to make investments in the campus, I think, is absolutely the right thing to do, but we don't need to do it at the expense of our kind of core mission. And then, you know, just the realization that we'll be continuing to refine enrollment projections as we move through this process. Updating slides as late as yesterday. We'll be doing some of the same things, you know, when we get into the spring. So that will be another piece that will, you know, will constantly change as we work our way through this.
Just want to talk a little bit about the process and the assignment of targets. The first point is that the goal of assigning targets is really to create a series of ideas or suggestions. It's in many ways sort of a buffet of options to choose from. And in many ways, and I really hope that we get ideas submitted, that collectively there are ideas submitted that lead to conversations that allow us to build out better targets and better end products. This is not a copy-paste exercise. Units are not going to submit proposals that we will just time and date stamp and accept. It is expected, we demand really, that it be an iterative process. And we are unanimous in agreement that the reduction of targets has to be ultimately strategic and reflect our priorities as a campus. And just not to be glib about it, but this is not an exercise left to a calculator. We have to work through and really understand what we're doing and why we're doing and make the choices that we think best serve the students and the people of the state of Maine. Our most fundamental principle of analysis will be to analyze all the proposed reductions through a lens that looks to assess impact on students. So we want to pay very conscious attention and really articulate around our core mission. And you'll see in the next slide that we have held the percentage targets in key areas to less than their actual percentage in the budget. This does not mean that the projected targets are not difficult, and I am in no way glossing over the challenge of this, but I think you'll appreciate some of this when you look at the numbers, which are still just targets. Let me flip slides here. And I'll talk more about the timeline for responses. We will get our first intake, I guess, of responses from really the division heads on October 22nd. So it'll be in another, what is today? In another week. So I'm going to, before I turn the podium back to Jeff, I want to give a little bit information about several of the areas listed on the slide here. The President's area includes athletics, equal opportunity, and marketing and communication, even though technically marketing and communication reports to the provost, but the budget for marketing and communication is embedded in the President's office. And we are working through a process to assign that $440,000 target in toto to the areas within the President's office. I will say that the athletics target has been set at $200,000. You'll note that the student affairs target is $200,000 and the development target is $500,000. The goal is to be most efficient in how we go about managing our fundraising operation. And we believe that tighter coordination and more efficient operations with our advancement partners, and that includes the Alumni Association and the University of Maine Foundation, can lead to greater efficiencies and economies of scale, which will ultimately lead to increases in fundraising. And with that, I'll allow Ryan and Jeff to now talk about some other pieces. I don't know what order you're in.
I'll talk a little bit about the academic affairs and provost piece. I've got to find out from June, how did I deserve that one person gets named specifically, but academic affairs, just to get, we all use our lingo. So just what that means, that's the 5-degree granting colleges, the Honors College, Cooperative Extension, the library, are all within academic affairs. And as President Hunter pointed out, we're roughly 74% of the overall university's budget. So the percentage of the cut we're taking is roughly 46%. So we've already made a strategic decision to move a piece of the cut out of academic affairs, which I greatly, greatly appreciate. What we're doing now, we're engaged in a process, as President Hunter indicated. Some time ago, I gave each dean and director a target number. That number was actually based on taking that $3.2 million and actually dividing it proportional to their piece of the budget, and then asking for a plan. And the plan is essentially how would you meet this budget cut if in fact this was the number that you end up with. For the second piece we've asked for is an impact statement. What will be the impact on your area if we were to move ahead with a budget cut of this size? And our plan on the 22nd, we'll be receiving those from deans, directors, other vice presidents, is to then work with those data and look at how do we minimize, as President Hunter said, minimize the impact on student experience. Are there ways of looking across the campus that we can find shared ideas, that we can challenges people to think a little bit outside of their silos to make connections that might help us to meet the target. We anticipate, or in fact I could say quite confidently, that of this dollar amount will not end up being evenly distributed across each area proportional to its budget. But that is the starting point for the conversation. And it's a conversation that will unfold over the next month or so.
So just to continue on that point, again, you can see the focus, between academic affairs, research, and student affairs. That's about 80% of our E&G budget. It represents about 51% of the targets. So you can see what the priority setting was there. When you do that, of course it's easy to say, well, let's just reduce the target in these key areas, but the end result is you end up with some number that needs to go somewhere. And so, there are two strategies for that. One is you could make the folks that are left take disproportionate cuts, which we've done in a couple of places where we thought there was opportunities for additional savings. But just want to focus on this area. I mean, one of the I've done enough of these budgets to recognize the pros and cons of target setting, and one of the pros I think is it generates ideas, and again, as the president said, not copy and paste ideas, but every once in a while you'll get an idea and you'll say, well, that doesn't really work here, but maybe if we put a different spin on it, or here's a great idea that they came up with over here, let's talk. Maybe we could do that campus-wide, or maybe we could do it over here too. And so, the downside of those targets is it encourages those siloed conversations. I've got a target for my area, and that's where I'm focused. What we hope to do here is look at more campus-wide solutions, ideas that we can come up with through collaboration. To the extent that somebody overachieves in a target area, to the extent that some of the system-wide budget parameters change, it allows us to kind of buy down this number. So again, the goal was to mitigate the impact in those student-centered areas without disproportionately devastating somebody else's budget to do that. I think that this is, I'm not going to suggest that we're going to find $1.5 million very, very easily, but in the scheme of a $240 million budget, I think there are certainly opportunities to look at.
So let's talk a little bit about the key principles in decision making, and I think the first one is really fundamental. The principles and process will be transparent to faculty and staff, and feedback and input will be encouraged throughout this process of building the FY16 budget. It's important, wait a second, I'm going to put all of them up there. It's important to stress that although we absolutely have to develop a balanced budget that addresses the structural gap, we do need to continue to invest in instruction, enrollment growth, and strategic academic and research areas. So we will be focused on being as strategic as possible. What? Oops, sorry. I thought if I pressed it one more time, it'd probably change. Sorry, lost count. We are really intending to be as strategic as possible. We really do want to minimize the impact on academic and student service areas, that they are our core mission. But I know that everyone on campus is really worried about possible impacts on employment. The FY16 budget plan does not include any academic degree program closures. And the goal will be to avoid faculty retrenchments and impact on employment for faculty and staff. That's as explicit as I can be right now, and we will, as the year unfolds and as we know more, we will be explicit at going forward. So what's next? There's some key dates. Today was this first presentation to the campus. October 22nd, we have the first impact statements due, and after that there'll be a certain amount of processing and analysis. And it could very well be that we will be getting feedback. We'd love to be getting feedback, and as information comes in from the various division heads and the feedback from the campus community, we see some opportunities to do some things differently, and we'll have to wait and see what we get. In December, we will come back out to the campus community, and we will lay out the plan that we will be submitting to the University of Maine system, and it will be due by the end of December. It's due before Christmas. And then I know we will come back out in spring after the budget has been approved, and we will walk through everything that the Board of Trustees has approved. Now, we have identified those 3 dates. We also have obviously, as you saw early on, the sites where feedback is requested. I know we will be going out. We are very willing and responsive to requests for meetings. We will be meeting with the Faculty Senate. I can't stress it or say it more, I think, more seriously or sincerely. We really encourage your feedback, and we really want to engage in the conversation, because I think the more everyone understands about what we're doing, the easier it will be to deal with, and we will also capture the creativity and the talent of this campus in dealing with the situation. We will end up with a better product based on the input from our campus community. So what do we do going forward? We work collectively to develop this FY16 budget. We provide an affordable, quality education. We advance knowledge through research. I think of it as we engage in teaching that engages students by utilizing current practice, which is really grounded in how people best learn. And that's a process that results in growth of both the student and the teacher. We conduct research and scholarship that is critically evaluated within the discipline. In many fields, it also attracts significant external funding. We conduct outreach that is connected to and supportive of the people and the enterprises of the state of Maine. And in doing all of this, we insert students in real-world enterprises to inform their academic work and provide incredible growth opportunities. And I believe in many cases it is those engagement opportunities where passion is discovered. This is a wonderful university, and we all have critical roles to play to contribute to the future of the people of the state of Maine. So we will be working very diligently over the next few months to build the FY16 budget. We will provide information as we proceed, and we will especially provide information as we see changes in assumption, changes in information, changes in what is occurring in the state, whether that's a change that essentially works in our favor or whether that presents a greater challenge. But we will come out and we will talk about it. We will not be hiding anything, any of the information from any of you. And at this point, we'll be happy to take questions. And we can always go back and look at any of the slides if somebody wants to refer to something. We can easily do that.
You mentioned the electronic contact that you're trying to do. Is that for new students, transfers, and what's your return on investment that you're expecting on that? Transfer.
Are you talking about reaching out to students?
Yes.
That's annual students now. It does include targeting high school students. It's not targeting transfer students. And the return on investment, that's a great question. This is our pilot year that we're starting this. This company will be here Friday. Your point will be coming to Almay with them at 8 o'clock Friday morning and say, this is a new relationship. This could be the beginning of a beautiful friendship, or it can be a one-shot deal. And we need to know probably wasn't inspired.
Yes, I mean, the one thing is we certainly want to, I mean, I can't tell you what to say. I sincerely believe everything I said. This is a wonderful university. We provide outstanding education for our students. They have tremendous opportunities on campus. And I think if we're realistic about that, we have a wonderful story to tell. Every budget season is challenging, and I am in no way minimizing this because it is very difficult and we have to be realistic about it. But I think it was, in fact, one of the reasons we wanted to get out this week, and it's a very busy week. We had a bunch of things. We have homecoming, we have the Board of Visitors here, but we really wanted to get out and share what we know now, the information we have, the approach we're taking, because it's very true that University of Southern Maine is going through a very, very significant challenge. And I'll personally, I don't want that story to dominate everything in the whole state because it tends to overshadow everything else that's going on. And that's not meant to minimize their situation, it's serious, but I also don't want it to become our situation, describe that their situation is our situation, because it is not. And so we felt it's important to have people realistic about where we are, but we are not in the same place. And the fact that the structural gaps vary from campus to campus, obviously not only in dollar amount, because our size varies so much, but in the percentage varies because the structural gaps are determined by the operation of the campus. It's a misalignment of revenue and cost on the campus. So the situation on one campus is not identical to the other campuses.
If I could just add one piece. I mean, I think the thing that, you know, I had the pleasure, unfortunate pleasure maybe, of being finance commissioner for the state. Started in September of 2008, right when everything went downhill. And you know, so I lived through that process of supplemental budget after budget after budget, and just, you know, going back to the same people every time and asking them to make reductions and being more efficient with less resources. And that can be very frustrating. I completely understand that. I think what people want to see is progress. And that's what I see when I look back, you know, over the last couple of years at this campus, and when I look forward, I can see that progress there. I mean, I know where the gap was 2 years ago. I know where it was as you entered this budget cycle, and some very difficult choices were made. And, you know, when I look at FY16, again, to echo what the President said, it's not to minimize any of the reductions that we may have to make over the course of the next several months. But again, you know, it's all about lining up expenditures and revenues when you're talking about a structural gap, and to the extent that we've addressed issues associated with smoothing, for instance, that we've taken a number of positions that we had funded with one-time resources and we've put them back into the base. You know, if you pull just, for instance, the smoothing piece out, we'd be looking at a structural gap of about $4 million on a $240 million budget. $4 million would still be very difficult, but, you know, in the scheme of the size of the budget, it's a pretty good number. And I think it shows a lot of the progress that we've made, and I think that's what we need to do. We need to continue to make progress.
And I'll just say, when we talk about making progress, it's all of you that make the progress. It's not us standing down here. It's what you do. It's what you do in the classrooms and laboratories. It's what you do when you work with students, whether you're in student services or academic affairs. It's a collective progress of a university. That's what's important.
My question is, we went over the specific challenges facing the campus affairs and provost area, but there's also a fairly large number listed for the UP administration amendments. How are we addressing those, or the challenges facing that?
Yeah, so I think, you know, one of the things that has, you know, impressed me in my 6 weeks here, and maybe I'm a little biased about this, is that you know, the folks that work in admin and finance, the folks that are running the show there, the employees, just you know, it's been, as I said at the beginning, I've been very impressed, very initial conversations, I think some very good ideas about things that we can do to be a little more efficient with the resources we have. So, I think for our slice of the pie, $900,000, I think it's going to be challenging. But in my conversations so far, I've heard some good proposals, some good ways to get there. So, I'll know a little bit more when we get to the 22nd and we start talking about the specific impacts of those. But I'm pretty confident that we can achieve that target and that we can do it in a way that allows us to minimize the impact in some of the other areas of the budget, but does it in a way that I think is strategic within our own area. Yeah, I think this is one where I just have to commit to getting back to you on that piece. I mean, one of the, I know those processes exist, and I could call on Stuart or Claire to talk about that specifically if you wanted. I know those processes exist there. It's just in my 6 weeks window. It's not something that I've dived in. I've been focused on the bigger picture of depreciation, what we were going to use for the budget, and less how we would spend it just because of my own time crunch.
But we're not fully funding depreciation, just to.
I can give a quick comment.
Does those funds stay on campus, or does the depreciation funds go to the systems?
They stay here.
They stay here.
Okay.
And just very briefly, Jeff and John led this up, or worked with Stuart on this effort, and something we started in the summer to reorganize, how we want to go about collecting information and engaging in decisions about rent space renovation. So we're administrative reform committees. We have a structure that has a committee that now looking at space allocation and a committee looking at space renovation. They report up to a oversight group. We're about to go public with that. It's not out yet, it's very close to being out. We check with the deans, we're involved with that. Part of that is then so that we're collecting information a little bit more systematically than we have historically about where the needs are. And then we can look at our resources and make, hopefully good decisions about where we're looking to address the many renovations needs we have.
Ellie, I know you're focused on Murray Hall, a building near and dear to me. Mary?
Can I ask two questions?
Sure.
First, on the outcome-based budgeting for the system, I know there were many people on our campus who had concerns and felt that the metrics that they were using did not be fair to the flagship member of these institutions. What process are you going to use to look for whether there are new metrics that might impress the chancellor and the trustees and change?
Well, that has to unfold. I mean, I agree. I think I've been part of numerous conversations. I don't think the metrics are entirely appropriate at all, not entirely appropriate for this campus. If you look at how outcomes-based funding tends to play out, and I'll look to Brian to confirm this, but the University of Maine, what we do is we lose a portion of the appropriation that would have historically come to us. And also, UMaine, the highest loses a portion of the appropriation that would go to them. So it seems to, the way it works is it seems to somehow not work on either extreme of the spectrum, I guess. We will be thinking of other ways that we might propose some alternative metrics. I know of other state systems where there might be, let's say, boilerplate metrics that every institution has to utilize, and then there's a little bit of a menu option here and there to account for differences in scale and scope. And we have to, frankly, we have to think and be creative. I've been proposing this at least for 3 years, have not, so I don't want to promise that this will happen, because clearly I haven't gotten it so far.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, well, I mean, the process that's outlined there is really only changing the length of the dialogue that occurs with the system office. There's no other, at least as part of this particular initiative, there's no other, in this case, unified doesn't mean literally, it means pulling all the budgets together, but not literally, combining budgets, or it's not anything associated with the finance conversations around overhauling that piece. It's literally just pulling together. So from the system perspective, really the only difference is just a longer dialogue with the trustees, which, it presents a challenge. I think there's more benefits to the longer schedule than there are negatives, but from a trustee perspective, I think it makes absolute sense. I mean, the way that this was done before, with, literally showing up, doing a 20-minute presentation, times 7, and then asking the trustees to approve $600 or $700 million worth of expenditures based on 7 20-minute presentations is not really fair to the trustees, and then to hold them accountable for the next year for all the decisions that are made. So I think the new timeline makes more sense from the trustees' perspective, and I think it will have benefits to all of the campuses as we kind of go through that back and forth.
Ryan, you made a comment earlier on about the relationship with the legislature and seeing more people down there in relationship to that budget process and the elections. Do you have a plan, or are you proposing anything particular?
Yeah, we're having some conversations about that, so we don't have a plan completely yet. We had a couple of trips last year where, for instance, we took the trustees down. We spent a day with the trustees in Augusta. We met with the education committee. We met with leadership. And I felt like at the end of the day, a lot of the folks that I was in regular dialogue with in my former position had a much better understanding of where we were moving, what direction we were moving in. So, same thing with the USM conversation. We had a number of students and faculty who came up from USM at the end of the session who were making a push for additional funding. I think they were specifically looking for one of the campuses, but I think the larger point was I thought it was very effective. I think it's always better to have more people there making that point. They've seen my face there for 16 or 17 years. It's better to get, it's like any legislative issue. You get 5 or 6 phone calls and it seems like a crisis, and so that's what we want. We want people there on a regular basis. We want people reaching out to their legislators, talking about the impact that state appropriation can have on our campuses. So I'll absolutely be following up on that. Yes. Although it's, just to point out, those are always point-in-time estimates. So the 7 million today is a point-in-time estimate. It may be 6.9 tomorrow or 7.1, and that's the same as the 69. But yes, that's.
And so beyond FY16, is there any guesstimate of what our portion of the FY17 deficit?
Yeah. So we're going through. One of the other complications of this exercise is that, typically the process for the last several years has been that the campuses work on what they refer to as the multi-year financial analysis, I think is the A. We do that in the fall, and that's how you roll up to these, so you roll up to 7 campuses and you arrive at big numbers like 69 million. And so one of the challenges, now we're going through that same process at the same time we're building a budget. So we're doing a 5-year forecast out through 2020. So we'll have a better idea over the next couple of weeks as we finalize that piece. We'll see, we'll be able to plug in the numbers that we're doing now and then see how those translate out into 17 and 18. We think they're trending, they're trending in the right direction here, but again, we'll have a better idea over the next couple of weeks, and we'll certainly share that with folks.
And the second question I had was in regards to the slide that was near and dear to the tuition fees comparison.
Yeah.
Slide.
Do you want to say it again? Yeah, we can. Oh, we'll
Yep.
get there.
Too much time, but I didn't see that average income levels by state is incorporated into that, and I'm wondering if the inclusion of that information further is that exactly
No, it's not. That's just a straight.
I'm wondering if you included average income by state, that would provide a more complete picture of how we're doing relative to our I don't think it would be as much. I want your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I do know that that's one of the system targets is, you know, how we relate median income. That's one of the measurements in the board's, it's not, is it goals and metrics, I think is what they're referring to at this time. So that is one of the things that we're tracking. I suspect you're exactly right. We'd fare pretty good in that, and it's certainly something we'll take a peek at.
You mentioned a director of assessment. Is that an on-campus person, and who is that?
Yes, it is, and he's sitting behind you. It's a behind door.
Oh. All right. Thank you.
The 7 signature program hires are very positive, but retirement, designations, expirations have created many more openings than those 7. What's the timeline for permission to fill open faculty positions for which funding has been identified?
So the next wave of that, when we hope will be, so these impact statements and budget plans are October 22nd. Shortly after that, we should be able to approve to the teams to go forward with sort of a next wave of hires. And then I would anticipate, as we refine the budget plan for our final or penultimate number, probably a third or another wave sometime perhaps, probably early December. So first set of approvals, hopefully will be right after so we get them impact statements on the 22nd. The teams know how much money they have left after they develop their plans. I anticipate within a week we'll be able to say,